we had a Quran in our home in Iran.
Yeah.
And what we did with it, every New Year we put it on the table. When we travel, we take it, we kiss it, they move it around our head for good luck. We did many things with that book. What we never did is read it.
Hello everyone. I just wanted to start off by saying that I'm sorry for the lack of uploads the last few weeks. My summer work schedule is always crazy and I've just been too exhausted to make videos. With that being said, I also wanted to announce my second channel. As most of you know, I run a podcast called The Heathen Hour Podcast with my co-host Shannon Q, and we've recently created a channel that will be dedicated to the podcast. For right now, we're still going to broadcast from this channel and upload the episode over there, but I'm hoping to make Heathen Hour its own separate entity in the near future. I would really appreciate it if you took a second to subscribe to that channel. I'll leave a link in the description box in case you're interested. Now, let's jump into today's video. The video I'm responding to was a little over 34 minutes long, so I had to cut out large chunks of it. As always, I'll leave the link in the description box, and I urge you to give it a watch for yourself. The beginning of the original video was basically a heavy dose of emotional manipulation, where the narrator attempts to make you feel bad by highlighting various news stories featuring murder victims. I think we can all agree, murder bad. People do bad things. Let's skip that part and get to his actual argument for the death penalty being reinstated in Canada.
Okay, so as you can see, up until 55 years ago, Canada actually was following one of God's important laws regarding the proper punishment for certain criminals.
I hear you. We should go back to a simpler time. A time when people talked to magical burning bushes and carved laws onto tablets and stuff.
Those who will not live by the law shall die by the law.
All right. And most of these people were either murderers or pedophiles. And, back then, the general public never had any remorse for the death of these types of people. The death penalty is a deterrent for crime, and it always has been. It's always been a deterrent for crime.
Opposing the death penalty isn't necessarily about feeling remorse for the criminal. At least for me, it isn't. It's more about the criminal justice system being imperfect, which can lead to innocent people being murdered by the state. It's more about the efficacy of the death penalty, and the numbers show it doesn't work. For example, you claim that the death penalty acts as a deterrent, but states without the death penalty have lower murder rates than states that do. Quote, indeed, 10 of the 12 states without capital punishment have homicide rates below the national average, Federal Bureau of Investigation data shows, while half the states with the death penalty have homicide rates above the national average. In a state-by-state analysis, the Times found that during the last 20 years, the homicide rate in states with the death penalty has been 48% to 101% higher than in states without the death penalty. The study by the Times also found that homicide rates had risen and fallen along roughly symmetrical paths in the states with and without the death penalty, suggesting to many experts that the threat of the death penalty rarely deters criminals. End quote. So, if your argument is that the death penalty acts as a deterrent, you're just wrong. The numbers just don't back your argument. I particularly like this quote because it kind of illustrates religious thinking in general. Quote, the idea that the death penalty would reduce crime is a little bit like saying rain dancing is going to produce rain, said John Donahue, a law professor at Stanford University, who has evaluated a number of studies on whether the death penalty deters crime. It's probably about as strong a finding as you can get. There's no statistical study that has given us any reason to believe the death penalty reduces murder. End quote. Death penalty cases also cost more, and I'm not talking a little bit more either, but sometimes 3 times as much as comparable non-death penalty cases. And unlike God, I actually care about human life, and I don't want to see innocent people being murdered by the state in my name. As far as I can tell, your Bible is wrong, and there really isn't a good reason to support the death penalty in Canada or anywhere else. Now, I openly acknowledge that if my loved one was murdered, I'd likely want the perpetrator killed, but I don't want the law to reflect either my personal need for revenge or be based on a decision I'd be making in what could be classified as one of my most vulnerable of mental states.
Okay, God set up the death penalty, and we're going to look at that, and I'm going to explain to you the purpose of this video. And another quick fact that would be pretty hard for anyone to believe nowadays is that being a homosexual, a sodomite, was even punishable by death. All right? Clearly a subject that would literally be suicide if brought up today.
Gotta love how he just shoehorns that little tidbit into the video. Hey, I'm not actually advocating for the unpopular opinion that homosexuals should be put to death, but, they used to be. Wink, wink.
So you might be wondering, why am I making this video, regarding this subject matter, right? You might even be offended. Well, to be honest with you, all right, people like Vince Lee offend me, all right? And people like Vince Lee pretty much offend anybody who has a normal mind, a normal thinking brain. But most importantly, people like Vince Lee offend God, okay, because he's a reprobate.
Then God should do something about him. Funny thing though, God always seems to need humans to carry out its wishes. It's almost like, no, wait, that's crazy talk, but it's exactly the sort of outcome you'd get if this God didn't exist at all. Very strange.
Our justice system today, as it currently stands, is about rehabilitation, not punishment. So what that means is when some of the most hideous crimes are committed in this country, such as in the nature of Vince Lee, okay, which is not very common, by the way, but when they do occur, our government's interest is rehabilitation. This is wrong because what that means is that the worst criminals get off the hook scot-free.
Well, they don't get off the hook scot-free. We do have prisons, and people are sent there when they do things that break the law. He talks about Vince Lee throughout this video, so I'll quickly explain who he is. Vince Lee stabbed, beheaded, and partially cannibalized Tim McLean on a Greyhound bus in 2008, because he said that he had heard the voice of God commanding him to decapitate and eat McLean because he was an alien. Mental health professionals said that Lee suffered from untreated schizophrenia, and the courts found him not criminally responsible for the murder of McLean in 2009. For 7 years, Lee received treatment at the Selkirk Mental Health Center before being allowed to move to Winnipeg, where he was treated at Health Science Center. He was recently released and was granted an absolute discharge, which means he can move about society without any restrictions. Now, critics of the ruling may have a point when they say that Lee could commit a similar crime if he were to stop taking his medication, and because he's been granted an absolute discharge, there are no rules in place that compel him to take his medication. But to pretend as if the courts just shrug their shoulders and let Lee off is disingenuous. I also don't want the state taking the lives of mentally ill individuals either. And finally, no, the criminal justice system isn't just about rehabilitation. You can read about the criminal justice system on the Corrections Canada website, and you can clearly see here that punishment is a key factor.
Okay, and in Genesis chapter 9, this is when Noah and his family get off the ark. We see God here, he's establishing the death penalty because beforehand it wasn't so. And I believe God did this as a deterrent for crime to let mankind think twice before his actions. All right, because in the pre-flood world, the world was ruled with violence, okay? Which is the reason why God flooded the earth to begin with. So therefore, in the post-flood world, God wanted to establish a new set of rules and laws for man to live by, okay? So that this wouldn't happen again. So you see, one thing that people have to realize, okay, and something that people who are against capital punishment fail to understand is that God invented the death penalty. Okay, not man. It's not a man-made law. God invented it.
Let me get this straight. Your all-good God created the death penalty when it decided to drown every living thing on the planet besides a select couple from each species? Newsflash, there's no evidence that a worldwide flood occurred. Your flood myth is ridiculous. Your support of the idea that killing babies, children, people, and animals in a worldwide genocide was a good idea is disgusting. And if your God did create the death penalty, as I have demonstrated in this video, it failed miserably.
We clearly see here that the government's only role in governing its people is to protect their safety by punishing criminals. All right, and the death penalty is the best way to do this. Not a flawed justice system that replaces proper punishment with rehabilitation.
To be honest, I tend to think of human beings as conscious meat machines with onboard computers. I know that's not the sexiest of views, but stick with me for a second. If there's 100 conscious machines in a room, and one of them short circuits and starts destroying one or more of the other machines in that room, it's in the best interest of the other 99 machines to segregate that one damaged machine from the others. We call that prison. Now, if I could somehow fix that broken machine so that it no longer feels the urge to damage the other machines, then I see no reason to continue to punish it, other than to make the other 99 machines feel good. Sometimes a broken machine can't be fixed, and it will always feel like damaging the other machines. In that case, we keep it segregated from the rest of the population for as long as it remains functioning. We call that life imprisonment. So, while I agree that part of the reason the criminal justice system exists is to protect and punish criminals, it isn't its only role, and I don't think it should be either. As we gain more knowledge about how the human brain works, what sorts of inputs are more likely to lead to bad behavior, and how we can correct that behavior, our criminal justice systems should reflect those realities.
If there be a controversy between men, and they come into judgment, that the judges may judge them, then they shall justify the righteous and condemn the wicked. And it shall be, if the wicked man be worthy to be beaten, that the judge shall cause him to lie down and to be beaten before his face according to his fault by a certain number. 40 stripes he may give him, and not exceed, lest, if he should exceed and beat him above these many stripes, then thy brother should seem vile unto thee. Okay, so this punishment here is talking about stripes, and that means basically a beating.
No. It means basically a whipping. So, you want to go back to whipping people. Okay, then.
Okay, we are a nation far removed from God, far removed from the Bible.
Thankfully, I'd be perfectly okay with moving further away from those barbaric teachings. That's all I have for you today. Please leave your thoughts in the comment section below. Take care, and cheers.